Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Friday, April the 8th. A beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but windy day here in the Dallas area. They're doing some construction here in the neighborhood, so if you hear some sounds in the background, it's not that the city is coming down, but they're doing some construction out in the streets, and it's been a lively morning to say the least here around our studio, if I can put it that way. Well, today we're going to talk about a brand new poll that came out over at Rasmussen Reports. One of the reasons that I like Rasmussen and one of the reasons that so many people rely on Rasmussen is because they use likely voters. And likely voters are the most reliable because these are people who have voted before and therefore are most likely to vote again. And they use likely voters in their polling or their surveys. They also use 1,000 voters in their samples, so they use a lot of people when they're doing their samples. And they just came out with a devastating set of polls regarding the Biden administration and voters. And when you look at these numbers, when you share these numbers, you can certainly understand why the Democrats are so depressed about 2022. So let's look at some of these numbers just to give you an idea. 81% of the voters believe that the issue of crime, is going to be very important in the midterms. Now, when we're talking about crime, of course, a lot of the crime is focused in what we would like to call blue cities, meaning cities run by the Democrat Party. So that's a problem because that's an issue the Democrats are going to have to run against in many of these cities. And frankly, the Biden administration has not taken a very assertive attitude when it comes to crime. I realize that crime is a local problem, but they could take a tougher attitude. For example, in Chicago, they could call in the governor and the mayor of Chicago and say, the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago, and say, look, guys, if you're not going to do something about this crime every weekend, I'm going to take over. He could do that, but he really hasn't. So crime, 81% of the voters believe that crime is going to be an important issue in the midterms. The approval rate for President Biden, his whole administration, is 41%. That's not a good number. 52%, or a majority, believe that the Biden administration, the Biden presidency, has been bad for the country. That's a devastating number. I've never seen anything like that before. And 62% believe that the economy has gotten worse under President Biden. Again, that's devastating. Those are devastating numbers, especially for a president heading into his first midterm. The problem for the Democrats is that people say, well, there's 8 months or 7 months or 8 months before, I guess 7 months before the midterms. And people say a lot of things can happen. But the reality is that this kind of perception is very difficult to change. When people feel this way about your presidency, more than likely they've already basically created an impression or an attitude, and this attitude is not going to get better over the next few months. So this is devastating, absolutely devastating information for the Biden administration, and especially for the Democrats who are going to have to run on this record. Now, a lot of Democrats are running away from Biden. We're seeing that over and over and over again. I was listening to a bunch of radio and television ads being run by Democrats across the country. Nobody's mentioning Biden. In fact, very few of these Democrats even tell you that they are a Democrat in their ads. So it's going to be a tough year for the Democrats. And when you see numbers like these, it isn't going to get any better, to say the least. Now, I have a post over at the American Thinker today about Governor Abbott, talking about busing some illegal immigrants to Washington, D.C., and putting them on a bus and sending them to the nation's capital. That particular action is going to be a lot more limited than I think many people believe. But I think the expression, the frustration that the governor is expressing here is for real. And I believe that if you go down to South Texas, you're going to find out that a lot of Hispanics who live on the border are very frustrated with the Biden administration, because the reality is that the people who are living in that border, they're the ones facing the crime, uh, the lack of resources. I mean, we saw some of this here recently when there were 15,000 Haitians on one side of the river, and on the other side of the river, you had the city of Del Rio, Texas, with a population of about 20 or 25,000 people. How does a city or 20 or 25,000 people, take in 15,000 refugees or 15,000 people? You can't. You don't have the resources. You don't even have probably enough bathrooms in a city to bring in that many people. So it creates all kinds of logistics problems in South Texas. It creates all kinds of crime problems because you don't know who these people are. And it just becomes a real nightmare. And that's what the people on the border are living every single day with that, with the entrance of people. So if you're talking about eliminating Title 42 and you're not going to have something in its place, that's a nightmare. That is a total nightmare for President Biden and the Democrats. So that's why you see more and more Democrats who are signing on to a letter that says, hey, forget about dropping Title 42. If you don't have something in place to replace it, forget it. Now, I don't know, frankly, if the Biden administration is going to listen to those Democrats or if the Biden administration is going to listen to the immigration activists. That's the question. I don't know. So far, the Biden administration has always been listening to the immigration activists, and that's been their problem. They're not listening to the people of South Texas. They're listening to immigration activists. So we'll see. We'll see where they go. But this Title 42, keep an eye on that, because if you think his approval rating is bad right now, wait until the doors open and people are coming in like crazy, and they're going to come in like crazy. And we're not going to be able to stop it. We just don't have the resources on the border to stop a flow of people of that size. I mean, we just don't have the Border Patrol agents and the resources to stop it. And it's not only going to be a humanitarian crisis, it's going to be just a terrible crisis for those cities. But here's the other thing, and this is what bothers me most about the Biden border policy. Who is actually benefiting from this policy? I mean, if you think about it, who's benefiting? The United States? No. Mexico? Not really. So who's benefiting? The only groups that are benefiting from this crazy policy are the criminal elements who are bringing people to the border and charging them for it, or obviously some of the criminal elements who are letting drugs or bringing drugs into the United States. So this is a bad deal. I really do not understand people who don't see it that way. And you're not helping the country. You're not even helping Mexico. This is another point that gets lost. When we visited Mexico during the holidays, I spoke to several Mexican friends who said to me that they were very angry with the Biden policies because they were turning Mexico into like a highway to the United States. And who is on that highway? The criminal elements who are taking advantage of the situation to bring people over and obviously to bring drugs into the United States. It's a bad deal. It's a terrible deal. But apparently the Biden administration doesn't seem to understand that. And the only way they're going to be stopped, I believe, is in November if there is a huge backlash against this. And I think there is going to be that backlash. Let me talk a little bit about Mexico. I have a post coming out, I guess that would be Saturday morning, where I'm talking about inflation in Mexico. The other day I was talking to a friend of mine in Mexico, and I was complaining about inflation in the United States. And he said, what are you complaining about? We've got the same problem. And he's right, they do. And in fact, their gasoline, when you calculate liters and gallons and all of that, their gasoline is actually more expensive right now than our gasoline, which is really remarkable when you consider the standard of living or the differences in the standard of living between the two countries. But inflation has always been very tough on Mexico. Whenever Mexico has a round of inflation, it has very significant impact in the country. It not only has economic impact, but it has political impacts. And it also drives a lot of people to the United States. So this is something else that we have to consider about eliminating Article 42. If you're going to eliminate Article 42 at a time when there is a serious economic crisis booming in Mexico, when we don't really know, for example, about the ability of Mexico and COVID, we don't know because, we don't have the information. So you're going to open up the border, and more people are going to come in the middle of a pandemic, even though the pandemic I know has gone down. I understand that. But the fact is that it officially still exists. You had Dr. Fauci recently talking about actually more lockdowns because there could be another type of whatever they call it, COVID, or whatever new version of COVID is available out there. So this is not a time to be removing Title 42. On the contrary, it's a time to keep it in place at least another 6 months. So just a bad idea on the border to do this Title 42. And when you combine the economic situation in Mexico right now, a very bad time. Well, let me leave you today with something a little bit of fun. The Texas Rangers begin their baseball season today. They're actually in Toronto, and they're going to start their season. The first home game is going to be here on Monday, but the first game of the season is going to be in Toronto today. And everybody is a little bit disappointed with the little problem there they had between the players and the owners, but hopefully we can put that behind us and follow the baseball team and enjoy the baseball season. I don't know about you, but for me, baseball is a great distraction, from all the other problems in the world, because from April to October, you've got something to talk about every single day because of the nature of the season being so many games, and every single day there's something to talk about with the baseball season. It's going to be an interesting year for the Rangers. They don't have the players yet to make it to the postseason, but they're getting close. They're getting close. And in the offseason, they made some very significant additions. So their lineup is very strong. Obviously, pitching is going to be the big question mark. So I expect the Rangers to be a 500 team. They're not going to be in the postseason, but I do expect them to be a good team to watch. They're going to be fun to watch because they're going to score a ton of runs this year. But the young pitching, they do have some young pitching in the farm system. That's coming. And that's going to be here probably 23, definitely by 24. And that's when I think this team is really going to be very, very good. So we're going to have some really good baseball here in the Texas area for the next 3 to 5 years. And this is the first of what I believe will be the first big season for this new crop of players that they've put together. So I'm looking forward to the baseball season. I hope you are too. Well, thank you for listening. Enjoy your day. Again, it's a very beautiful day here in North Texas, just a little windy for me, but it's an absolutely beautiful day. And thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day, everybody.